Chosen one, stop scrolling for just a moment. This is not random, and this is not an accident. The fact that you are hearing these words right now is evidence that heaven has already moved in your favor. Long before you opened your eyes today, long before you touched your phone, long before you took your first breath this morning, God spoke your name. Something was released over your life in the unseen. And what has shifted in the last 24 hours is about to change how you understand timing, purpose, and the reason your journey has unfolded the way it has. This moment is intentional. It is appointed, and it demands your attention. You may have felt it already. The subtle stirring in your spirit, the weight you couldn't explain, the sense that something is about to happen, but you don't yet have the language for it. That restlessness you've been feeling, especially in the quiet hours when the world is asleep, is not anxiety. It is not confusion. It is anticipation. Heaven is drawing near, and your spirit recognizes what your mind is still catching up to. This is what happens right before God activates an assignment. This is the tension that comes when preparation is giving way to movement. By the end of this message, 3 things will become clear to you. First, you will understand why the doors you prayed for never opened, and why those closed doors were not rejection, but divine protection. Second, you will see that the waiting season you thought was wasted time was actually shaping you, strengthening you, and preparing you for something far more specific than you imagined. And third, you will know what you must do now, in this very window of time, to step fully into the assignment God chose for you before you were born. This is not a message meant to hype you up or give you temporary encouragement. This is an activation. This is a call to alignment. We are not rushing past this moment. We're going to slow down, lean in, and allow clarity to rise. Before this ends, we will pray together. We will seal this word, and you will walk away with understanding that has been missing for months, maybe even years. If something is stirring in you right now, if your spirit feels both exposed and awakened, that is not coincidence. That is agreement. Heaven is already speaking, and your response matters. This is your moment to acknowledge what God is doing. Not loudly, not dramatically, but sincerely, as a sign of alignment, as a quiet declaration that you are ready to receive. Let heaven see your agreement. This is the beginning of movement. This is the moment where clarity replaces confusion, where anticipation replaces fear, and where waiting gives way to purpose. Stay with this. What comes next is not about who you've been. It's about who you're being called to become. There's a truth that often goes unnoticed when you're living through it, a truth that only becomes clear when you look back with spiritual vision. The hidden seasons of your life were never empty. They were never meaningless. They were never punishment. They were construction zones. Long before anything visible began to rise, God was laying foundations where no one else could see. What felt like stillness was actually structure. What felt like silence was instruction. And what felt like delay was precision. If you are honest, there were moments when you questioned everything. You questioned your prayers, your discernment, even your worth. You stood in front of doors you believed God Himself had led you to, only to watch them remain shut no matter how hard you knocked. You replayed conversations, decisions, and missed opportunities in your mind, wondering what you did wrong. But here is the perspective heaven has been holding the entire time. Those closed doors were never rejection. They were protection and redirection working together. God was not keeping something from you. He was keeping you from something. He could see what you could not see. He knew what that environment would cost you, what that connection would drain from you, what that opportunity would demand before you were ready to carry it. Sometimes the most merciful thing God can do is say no when we are convinced the answer should be yes. Sometimes love looks like resistance. Sometimes favor looks like frustration. Those doors did not close because you were unqualified. They closed because the assignment attached to your life required a different entrance, a different timeline, and a different version of you. God was not delaying your destiny. He was preserving it. As time passed, the waiting grew heavier. Days turned into months. Months stretched into years. And with every unanswered prayer, a quiet question formed beneath the surface. Did God forget me? That question did not come from rebellion. It came from exhaustion. You waited faithfully. You stayed obedient. You kept showing up even when nothing seemed to be changing. But heaven's response was not absence. It was timing. Delays were never denial. They were divine calibration. God was aligning multiple factors at once: your character, your capacity, your discernment, and the environment you would eventually be sent into. Destiny is never released prematurely, because premature exposure can destroy what was meant to flourish. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 speaks directly into this tension. For the vision is yet for an appointed time. Though it linger, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. What looks like delay to human perception is often perfect synchronization in the spirit. God does not operate on urgency. He operates on accuracy. And accuracy requires patience. Every extra season, every added layer of waiting was increasing your strength to sustain what is coming. If God had released the vision earlier, it might have crushed you instead of crowned you. Then there was the isolation, the season no one warns you about. The phase where your circle grew smaller, invitations faded, and conversations felt shallow or disconnected. People you once felt aligned with no longer understood you. Places that once energized you began to feel restrictive. You were present but unseen, available but overlooked. And in that obscurity, it was easy to believe you were being sidelined. But heaven was not pushing you aside. Heaven was pulling you closer. Isolation was not abandonment. It was training. God removes distractions before he releases direction. He quiets external voices so you can finally recognize his. In obscurity, your motives were purified. In silence, your discernment sharpened. When no one was applauding, your obedience became real. When no one was watching, your faith matured. This is where God builds leaders who are not addicted to affirmation. This is where he forms servants who can carry authority without needing validation. Scripture reveals this pattern again and again. Before David was crowned king, he was hidden in fields with sheep. Before Moses confronted Pharaoh, he was isolated in the wilderness. Before Jesus stepped into public ministry, he was led into solitude. Obscurity is not a detour from calling. It is the corridor that leads to it. You are not being overlooked. You are being fortified. This is why God does not call people who are already ready. He calls people who are willing. Willing to trust when clarity is absent. Willing to obey when affirmation is missing. Willing to stay faithful when progress feels invisible. Readiness is not the requirement. Surrender is. Once God finds a willing heart, he commits himself to the process of preparation. And that process is often uncomfortable because it reshapes how you think, how you respond, and how you see yourself. Jeremiah 1 verse 5 reveals something profound about this process. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Your assignment did not begin when you discovered it. It began when God designed you. Every trait, every sensitivity, every resilience you developed through hardship was intentional. God has been shaping you from the beginning, long before you had language for what you were carrying. The preparation was not reactive. It was planned. Even the battles that nearly broke you were not random. They exposed weak places so God could strengthen them. They revealed fears so God could replace them with courage. They surfaced wounds so God could heal them properly instead of letting them bleed into your future. Nothing was wasted. Not the tears, not the confusion, not the setbacks. Every experience was curriculum. And now, something is shifting. You may not see it yet, but you can feel it. The weight of waiting is lifting. The questions that once haunted you are losing their power. There's a clarity beginning to form, subtle but steady. This is because the preparation phase is ending. The foundation has been laid. The roots are deep enough. What has been built in secret is ready to support what will soon be seen in public. Activation does not arrive loudly. It often begins quietly, like a door opening where there was once a wall. Like peace replacing pressure. Like direction replacing restlessness. You are stepping into a new phase, not because you forced it, but because you survived the process. Heaven would not transition you if you are not ready. What is coming requires the maturity you gained in hidden places. Understand this clearly. The reason it took so long is because what you carry is significant. God does not rush the formation of those entrusted with weighty assignments. He prepares them thoroughly, so they will not collapse under influence, success, or opposition. You are not delayed. You are being developed. As this season closes, you are not stepping forward as the same person who first started praying for breakthrough. You are wiser. You are stronger. You are more grounded. You know the cost of obedience now. You understand the value of patience. You recognize God's voice more clearly because you learned to listen when everything else was quiet. The hidden season has done its work. What once felt like confinement has produced capacity. What once felt like restriction has produced readiness. The door that opens next will not require striving. It will require alignment. And you're closer to that alignment than you realize. This is the moment where preparation gives way to purpose. The waiting has accomplished what it needed to accomplish. The soil has been tilled. The roots are established. And now, the emergence begins. There is a reason the pressure intensified, right, when you began to sense that your life was meant for more. That quiet but persistent knowing, the one you try to suppress, rationalize, or talk yourself out of, was never arrogance, and it was never imagination. It was prophetic. It was the echo of something God placed inside you long before circumstances could name it. You didn't wake up one day and decide you were called. That awareness was awakened in you because heaven was reminding you of who you already are. And the moment that reminder began to surface, opposition followed. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because something eternal was beginning to stir. That inner sense of more has often been misunderstood, even by you. You may have questioned yourself, wondering if you were being unrealistic, prideful, or ungrateful for where you are now. But that feeling was not discontent. It was direction. It was not ego. It was invitation. God places desire in the hearts of those he intends to use, not as a tease, but as a compass. The hunger you carry is not for attention, position, or recognition. It is for alignment. It is your spirit responding to a future it has already seen, even if your mind hasn't caught up yet. And when that hunger surfaced, it did not go unnoticed in the spiritual realm. This is where many people become confused because they assume that if God is involved, things should become easier. But Scripture and experience both tell a different story. Often, things become more intense, not because God has stepped back, but because the enemy has stepped in. The resistance you encountered was not random. The delays, the unexpected obstacles, the emotional weight, the mental exhaustion, they were not signs that you missed God. They were signals that you were moving closer to what he assigned you to do. Spiritual opposition does not chase what is insignificant. It confronts what is dangerous to darkness. You see, the enemy does not fight who you are today. He fights who you are becoming. He does not waste resources on people who pose no threat to his plans. The moment your assignment began to activate, even subtly, it registered. The enemy recognized the authority you would carry before you ever did. He saw the impact your obedience would have, the lives your voice would reach, the systems your faith would disrupt. And because he cannot stop God's plan, he tried to stop your participation in it. Delay became the strategy. Confusion became the weapon. Pressure became the atmosphere. That pressure was designed to wear you down slowly, not break you all at once. To make you doubt yourself, question God, and reinterpret your calling as a burden rather than a gift. To convince you that maybe you misheard, maybe you're not ready, maybe this is as far as you go. Resistance came not to destroy you outright, but to exhaust you into surrendering your destiny voluntarily. That is how spiritual opposition often works. It whispers lies in seasons of silence, hoping you will come into agreement with them. But here is the truth you must understand. This has never been a natural battle. What you've been fighting cannot be explained solely by circumstances, people, or timing. The intensity did not match the situation because the source was not visible. Scripture makes this clear in Ephesians 6, verse 12. When it reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, authorities, and spiritual forces operating in unseen realms. In other words, what you experienced was not just resistance. It was recognition. Recognition of your assignment. Recognition of your future authority. Recognition of what your obedience would unlock. That is why some doors slammed shut without explanation. Why certain relationships shifted suddenly. Why opportunities disappeared just as they seemed within reach. These are not coincidences or bad luck. They were attempts to reroute you, distract you, or discourage you long enough to keep you from arriving where God intended. But what the enemy did not calculate was this. Every attempt to delay you also deepened you. Every moment of pressure refined your discernment. Every season of isolation sharpened your dependence on God rather than people. The very resistance meant to weaken you was strengthening something deeper. This is where the wilderness enters the story, not as a punishment, but as a proving ground. The wilderness has always been God's training environment. It is where calling is clarified, character is forged, and identity is stripped of anything counterfeit. Moses did not meet God in Pharaoh's palace. He encountered him in the desert. David was not shaped on the throne. He was formed in obscurity, tending sheep no one saw value in. Jesus himself emerged in power after the wilderness, not before it. The wilderness is where leaders are made, not where they are discarded. You may have interpreted your wilderness as failure, as being behind, as being forgotten, but heaven never viewed it that way. The wilderness is where distractions are removed so purpose can become clear. It is where reliance on applause is replaced with reliance on presence. It is where God teaches you how to hear his voice without noise, how to obey without affirmation, how to stand without support. These are not skills learned in comfort. They are cultivated in pressure. And you survive that season not because it was easy, but because you were being prepared for something that would require endurance, discernment, and authority. The enemy assumed that burying you would end you, that isolating you would silence you, that delaying you would neutralize you. But Scripture reveals a deeper truth. What is buried in God is never destroyed. It is planted. What tried to bury you has become the soil of your breakthrough. Every tear watered the ground. Every unanswered prayer strengthened the root system. Every moment you thought nothing was happening underground, something was forming that could not be rushed. This is why when the breakthrough comes, it often comes with force. What emerges is not fragile. It is established. The Apostle Paul speaks directly to this reality in 2 Corinthians 4 verse 7, when he says we carry treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. You are the jar, human, imperfect, vulnerable, but what you carry is divine. The pressure you endured revealed the contrast between your weakness and God's strength. It was never about proving how capable you are. It was about demonstrating how powerful God is when he works through someone willing to be emptied, shaped, and filled again. And now, something is shifting. The same awareness that once felt like a burden is becoming clarity. The same pressure that once felt suffocating is lifting. The same questions that once haunted you are being answered. Not all at once, but enough to move forward. This is what awakening feels like. The assignment that was dormant is stirring. The calling that felt distant is drawing near. Not because you finally earned it, but because the time is right. Because the foundation has been laid. Because what needed to be formed in you has been formed. Understand this clearly. The awakening of your assignment does not mean the end of opposition. It means a change in how you face it. You are no longer fighting to survive. You are learning to stand in authority. You are no longer questioning whether God is with you. You are beginning to trust that he has always been ahead of you. The battle does not disappear, but your position in it changes. You stop reacting and start discerning. You stop striving and start aligning. You stop fearing resistance and start recognizing it as confirmation. So when pressure comes again, and it will, do not interpret it as setback. See it as signal. When opposition rises, do not shrink back. Lean in. Ask what is being activated. Ask what is being threatened. Ask what God is inviting you to step into next. The enemy would not be fighting you this hard if what you carried did not matter. He would not resist your movement if your obedience did not have consequences in the unseen realm. And he would not try to silence your voice if it were not meant to release something powerful. The assignment is awakening. Not suddenly, not recklessly, but deliberately. What was once only a whisper is becoming a direction. What once felt like weight is becoming authority. And what once felt like delay is revealing itself as divine timing. You are not behind. You're not disqualified. You are not forgotten. You are positioned. And the very opposition that tried to convince you otherwise has become the evidence that heaven is not finished with you. As the moment of activation draws near, it is important to understand that stepping into what God has released is not chaotic or accidental. Heaven does not move without order, and destiny does not unfold without alignment. What you're sensing right now, the urgency, the clarity beginning to sharpen, the quiet pressure to move, is an invitation to partner with God intentionally. This next phase is not about striving harder or proving yourself worthy. It is about positioning your heart, your mind, and your daily walk so that what has already been released in the Spirit can manifest in the natural. And that alignment begins with clarity, not the kind that comes from overthinking, but the kind that is born in consecration. Clarity does not arrive through noise, busyness, or endless analysis. It comes when you deliberately step away from distraction and make space for God to speak. Consecration is not punishment, and it is not deprivation. It is focus. It is the act of saying, God, you have my attention. When you set time aside to pray, to fast, even if it is just one meal, and to listen without rushing the process, you are declaring that His voice matters more than your comfort. In those quiet moments, clarity begins to surface, not as a shout, but as a knowing. You begin to sense direction rather than confusion, peace rather than pressure. This is because surrender always precedes revelation. When you release your grip on control, God can finally place direction in your hands. Many people struggle here because they want clarity before surrender, but God works in the opposite order. Proverbs 3 verses 5-6 reminds us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. That means clarity is not something you extract from God through effort. It is something He gives when you submit your understanding to Him. As you consecrate yourself, questions that once felt overwhelming begin to simplify. You may not receive every answer at once, but you will receive enough light for the next step. And that is all faith requires. Movement based on obedience, not full visibility. When clarity comes this way, it anchors you. It keeps you steady when acceleration begins. And acceleration will begin. But before it does, clarity must settle into courage, because knowing what God is asking you to do is only powerful if you believe you're the one called to do it. This is where identity becomes critical. Courage does not come from personality, confidence, or experience. It comes from knowing who you are in God. Fear thrives in uncertainty about identity. Authority rises when identity is secure. The enemy does not need to destroy your calling if he can convince you that you are unqualified to carry it. That is why so many people hesitate at the edge of destiny. Not because they lack direction, but because they doubt themselves. When your identity is rooted in God's truth, fear loses its voice. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 tells us plainly that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Fear is not evidence of caution. It is evidence of misalignment. It shows up when identity slips. But when you remember whose you are, courage rises naturally. You stop asking, "Who am I to do this?" and start declaring, "If God called me, He will sustain me." Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move forward because fear no longer has authority over you. This courage will be tested, not once, but repeatedly. As doors begin to open, you will encounter moments that stretch you beyond your comfort zone. Conversations will happen that require boldness. Opportunities will appear that demand faith before you feel ready. In those moments, you will not rise to the level of your gifting. You will fall to the level of your identity. That is why daily declarations matter. Speaking truth over yourself is not arrogance. It is alignment. When you declare that you are chosen, called, anointed, and equipped, you are not trying to convince God. You are reminding your soul. Courage grows when identity is rehearsed, reinforced, and rooted in truth. But courage alone is not enough to sustain assignment. What begins in clarity and is fueled by courage must be maintained through consistency. This is where many people lose momentum. They respond powerfully to a moment, but struggle with the discipline of a lifestyle. Assignment is not activated in a single breakthrough. It is established through daily obedience. Faithfulness in small steps unlocks greater responsibility. Luke 16, verse 10 teaches that whoever is faithful with little will be trusted with much. God watches how you steward what is already in your hands before he releases what is next. Consistency looks ordinary, but it is powerful. It is choosing obedience when no one is applauding. It is showing up when progress feels slow. It is continuing to pray, serve, build, and believe even when results are not immediate. This kind of obedience compounds over time. Each small yes strengthens your capacity. Each act of faith builds spiritual endurance. Assignment matures in the unseen long before it produces visible fruit. When you stay consistent, you are telling heaven that you can be trusted with increase. This is important because what is coming will move faster than what you have experienced before. Expect acceleration, not gradual elevation, not slow progress, but sudden movement. Isaiah 60, verse 22 declares that in its time, the Lord will do it swiftly. That means what took years to prepare can manifest in moments. Doors you never imagined opening will open without warning. Conversations that shift your direction will happen unexpectedly. Resources, connections, and opportunities will align in ways you could not orchestrate if you tried. Acceleration is not chaos. It is compressed fulfillment. However, acceleration comes with responsibility. When things move quickly, discernment becomes essential. You will need wisdom beyond your natural understanding. You will need to stay anchored so that momentum does not pull you ahead of obedience. This is why consistency must remain even when speed increases. Do not abandon the disciplines that sustained you in hidden seasons just because visibility increases. Prayer, humility, and dependence on God are not optional in seasons of expansion. They are vital. Acceleration will also reveal hearts. Not everyone will celebrate your movement. Some will question your readiness. Others will misunderstand your motives. This is not a sign that you are off course. It is often confirmation that you are on the right one. When identity is secure and obedience is consistent, opposition loses its power to derail you. You remain focused because you know who sent you and why you are moving. As clarity sharpens, courage strengthens, and consistency stabilizes you, you will notice something shift internally. You will no longer feel the need to rush or force outcomes. There will be a calm confidence, a settled assurance that God is leading each step. This is what alignment feels like. It is not pressure-driven ambition. It is spirit-led movement. You begin to recognize which doors are God-ordained and which are distractions. You learn to wait without anxiety and move without hesitation. This is the posture that allows acceleration to work for you rather than overwhelm you. When doors open suddenly, you are ready. When resources release, you steward them wisely. When connections form, you discern their purpose. Everything begins to flow because you are no longer striving to make something happen. You are responding to what God is already doing. Remember this. God does not release assignment to impress you. He releases it to impact others. The clarity you gain is not just for direction. It is for service. The courage you develop is not just for boldness. It is for obedience. The consistency you practice is not just for discipline. It is for longevity. You are being positioned not for a moment of recognition, but for a sustained season of influence. And as you move forward, keep this truth close. You do not need to know every step, only the next one. Trust grows as you walk. Strength increases as you obey. Provision meets you as you move. When you lean not on your own understanding and acknowledge God in all your ways, He truly does make your path straight. Not always easy, not always predictable, but always purposeful. This is how activation unfolds. Not in a rush, not in fear, not in confusion, but in alignment. Clarity through consecration grounds you. Courage through identity propels you. Consistency through obedience sustains you. And acceleration becomes the natural result of a life yielded to God. What He has released is already in motion. Your role now is to stay aligned, stay faithful, and keep moving forward. The assignment is not approaching. It has already begun. As we bring this moment to a close, it is important to pause and acknowledge what has already taken place in the Spirit. This is not an ending. It is a sealing. The assignment you have been waiting for is not delayed, postponed, or withheld. It has begun. What once felt distant is now active. What seemed hidden is being revealed, not all at once, but intentionally, step by step, in perfect alignment with God's timing. You're not standing on the edge of purpose anymore. You have stepped into it. Declare this truth clearly. Even if your circumstances have not fully caught up yet, the assignment is in motion. Heaven has released it, and nothing can reverse what God has ordained. What was formed in secrecy is now coming into light. What was prepared in silence is now finding its voice. You are not behind. You're not late. You are exactly where you need to be for what is unfolding now. Trust that what God initiates, He sustains. Let us seal this with prayer, not as a ritual, but as a surrender. Father God, we thank You for clarity where there was confusion, for courage where there was fear, and for wisdom where there was uncertainty. We receive divine acceleration, not driven by ambition, but guided by Your Spirit. We ask that You keep our hearts humble as doors open and opportunities increase. Teach us to remain dependent on You in every season, remembering that success without surrender is empty, but obedience with You leads to life. Grant us discernment to recognize what is from You and the strength to release what is not. Keep us grounded as You elevate us. Let our character remain aligned with our calling, and let our private devotion match our public obedience. We ask not only for movement, but for maturity, not only for progress, but for purpose fulfilled in a way that brings You glory. Now comes your response. This is not a passive moment. This is your call to agreement. Publicly and intentionally align your heart with what heaven has declared. Do not shrink back. Walk boldly into what God has placed before you. Stay obedient when the path requires faith. Stay connected to God, to His Word, and to the people He assigns to walk with you. You were never meant to carry this alone. Hold fast to this final truth. God chose you. He did not make a mistake. Your assignment is secure, not because of your perfection, but because of His sovereignty. Step forward with confidence, knowing that you are supported by heaven. Let your life reflect gratitude, obedience, and faith. Move forward, not to make a name for yourself, but to give glory to the One who called you. What has begun will be completed. Walk in it,